The French River is north of the Great Lakes and it is a canoe route of historic importance. It flows southwards from Lake Nipissing to the top of Georgian Bay, and as such it was an important link joining routes taking in the Ottawa and Mattawa rivers down into the upper Great Lakes, used by First Nations and then explorers and voyageurs during the fur trade. And when you paddle here, there's always a sense of great history that you are joining the ranks of people who have explored and made Canada what it is today. Now, the French River only drops 19 meters over its 105-kilometer length, and the most concentrated section of whitewater is the 5-mile rapids section, which this video focuses on. It has 6 or 7 significant sets of rapids, more or less significant depending on the water level, but it flows from where the red dot is here down towards the bottom of the map. And those rapids, having names such as Big Pine Rapid and Blue Chute and Big Parisien Rapids and Crooked Rapids, certainly conjure up images in your mind when you're looking at the map of this area. The other thing you'll notice when studying the topography of this area is it is a complex landscape. The French River is not a single channel river. It is a complex set of interlinking channels, lakes and waterways that give endless opportunities for exploration. But the main voyageur route was down the main channel and through the 5-mile rapids section. First up in the 5-mile rapids section is Little Pine Rapids, and at this water level a very straightforward piece of moving water to negotiate.
Draws round a bit, the wind's blowing us wide, a little bit wide. Yeah, good. Just as you are.
An easy start to this classic section of river there, but this wide and really quite deep channel is somewhat deceptive. There's a good amount of water flowing down here, and particularly for this time of year there was a lot of water. There was a wet summer in this part of Canada in 2017, and the water levels for September were a lot higher than normal, and you get some idea of the volume of water when we hit these boily sections where we're being pushed around and you can see water bubbling up from the depths. Coming up next was Big Pine Rapids, and this is a more significant set of rapids and one that requires some care. Now, the observant among you will no doubt notice that this section is the one that featured on the front of Ray Goodwin's canoeing book, the 2nd edition, with yours truly paddling through the mist early morning after camping below that area with clients on a trip in 2012. So this is an area I've been to multiple times before, and unlike that photograph on the front of Ray's book when the water levels again at this time of year were normally quite low, now they were quite high, and we needed to land and check out what was going on with Big Pine. Even at this water level, it's quite an awkward, rocky entrance to this area. What follows is not necessarily straightforward, and you have to get the line right to avoid what's quite a large stopper or hydraulic at this water level. And then there's some good sized standing waves as well, which can swamp a boat if you don't get it right. So while I'd be happy to negotiate this area with a solo boat empty, with a tandem boat loaded with gear, it was easier and certainly less risky just to line the boat. Now, some people turn their nose up at lining, they don't enjoy doing it. but for me, it's part and parcel of the skill set that you need to travel in places like this. With Big Pine Rapids successfully and safely negotiated, we were then heading on down towards Double Rapids, which at lower water levels is nothing more than a double chute of water that's easy enough to paddle, but at this water level it was completely washed out. There were no rapids there whatsoever, hence my comments in the introduction to this. The number of significant rapids varies depending on water levels. Next up, Blue Chute. Blue Chute is another iconic rapid of the French River, and it's a little bit hard to inspect from the river. It sits right after a bend where the river constricts, and because of this constriction you get this malevolent looking tongue of water coming down into a pretty big wave train, certainly at this water level. It's not technically difficult, but the potential for swamping, certainly in the waves, is real. So you choose your line, I would say, a little bit to the right of this, and make sure that you don't swamp your boat. We'll see. Anyway, we parked up and we inspected the river, got back in our boat, and here we go. You'll see in a second though how the water really picks up speed as it constricts and drops over the lip and down into Blue Chute, and you can see it taking our boat. It just effectively sucks the boat down the rapid. It's a good fun rapid to run though. Only a little bit of bailing required, and then we were on our way. And once you're through Blue Chute, you're down into this gorgeous section running down towards Big Parisien Rapids. As you can see, the water was quite boily here again, with water squeezing up from lower down, moving around in interesting ways, and we were getting quite close to the top of Big Parisien, so we just took a moment to eddy out and have a look. What I was struggling with at this point was trying to see where we could land to have a look at the rapids, because there are a number of channels here, and at this water level there's a few of them flowing.
Some weird boils going on in that. I just want to have a closer look at this. If we can land, oh, the channel there. That's the problem, there's all these bloody side channels which open up.
It appeared that there was somewhere that we could land. Of course, there is a portage trail here, but what I wanted was somewhere where we could land and actually see what was going on in the rapids. And as we travel along here, you can see that there's a side channel with water flowing down it that's to the right of the actual rapids we want to inspect. So getting a good close look at the rapid we might run is not so easy at this water level. In fact, we were able to get a good view of the entry into the area and then get down towards the end of the rapids and look back up, have a look at this wave train in particular. I know from having run these rapids at lower water levels that there is a certain amount of rock which sticks out on the left-hand side of the river, which is causing a lot of that disturbance on the left, and I wanted to make sure that we didn't end up in amongst that. You can see that line running across from left to right from the rocks that are sticking out at the end. So we had a plan of where to enter the rapids, and the aim was to exit to the right of that disturbance. But I'll say from the start, we got this slightly wrong. We should have entered a little bit more to the right, and not because of this section, but in the middle the water slews from right to left. Here you can see us shifting to the left, pushing us towards where we didn't want to be. So now we're having to fight to get across to the right, and we hit some slow water with the front and it's nearly disaster. Good leaning from myself and Amanda, running out the bottom of the rapids backwards rather than forwards, and then turning.
It's alright, I did that. Forwards.
And keeping ourselves to the right of that wave train. So not quite the move we wanted to make, but the line we wanted in the end, but with a little pirouette in the middle.
Quite a strong recirculation on this, just put mind. You alright? Okay, let's turn before we get swept back into that. Draw us round, draw!
But we weren't quite in the clear yet. The eddy we were in was recirculating towards the top and back towards the rapids quite strongly, and also the run out from the rapids was very, very turbulent, and we needed to be careful with water going one way and then the other that we didn't end up tipping inadvertently.
This is boily as here. Less water in than the last one. It's pushing on to the left side a little bit, but not strongly. So I think if we go right of centre, allow it to take us left a bit and then straighten up. So push right, we're going way too far left at the moment.
Big Parisien Rapids, the rapids where we had our little pirouette, is at the left hand side of this bottom left hand corner at the moment, and we were running into a section where the river divides into multiple channels, and we were taking the left-handmost channel, which runs through a constriction called Devil Chute, and then you run into the bottom of Little Parisien Rapid, and then it opens out into a more lake-like stretch for a couple of kilometers. And this is the section that we were now going into. Beautiful section still.
No, that's good. Perfect. Yeah, it's the depth of water that does it. Yeah, and it's bouncing around and spinning up and down. That was all right.
The sun was getting somewhat lower now and giving a lovely golden light on the trees and the rocks. It really was showing this environment off to its best advantage. It was warm for the time of year, the water levels were really good, and we were thoroughly enjoying this run through the 5-mile rapid section of the French River. And as we came down to the bottom of Little Parisien, we had almost finished this classic section of rapids. Here we're going into a more lake-like section for about 1500 meters, and then we would be dropping down to the last set of rapids we needed to negotiate today, which would be Crooked Rapids. But we were savouring the time on this water, we were savouring the peace and quiet, being the only boat in sight, and looking forward to our camp in the evening and starting to think ahead about where we might want to camp. I was having a look at the map as we crossed this relatively flat and straightforward section of water. A little while later we came to the point where the river flowed out through a constriction again, and it was a little hard to see where it was going because of the sunlight and the glare off the water, despite wearing sunglasses, which are of course always important.
Looks like it's flowing off to the left quite strongly afterwards.
Again, in places the water was doing interesting things with boils and eddies and little whirlpools.
Right, I want to work right now, Amanda. Not too sharp though. Can't see around that bend. Yeah. Sounds like there's something more around there. Right, we're going to have to work hard to get across that.
At this point I couldn't quite see where the water was actually flowing to, whether it was going off round to the left or whether it was going straight on. Figured it was going around to the left and that we would need to land on the right, and that the main rapids that we would be approaching were over the rise that was in front of us, but it took just a little bit of figuring out, particularly with the sunshine in our eyes, a good amount of the time. This was Crooked Rapids, the last piece of moving water we were going to have to negotiate today, and indeed the last piece of moving water we'd see for about a day and a half. It's very flat after this. This again splits into two, as some of the rapids here do, and rejoins itself at the bottom. We could see that there were some interesting flows and boils both at the top and the bottom, and that there were some rocks in shallower water to the left hand side that we wanted to avoid, but it looked fairly straightforward. Even though it was called Crooked Rapids, you could see because of the shape, once we had eyes on it, it was going to be relatively straightforward, we thought. But we were always going to take care, particularly at this stage of the day.
You need to be prepared for what that was going to do, that's all. And once we hit this moving water, we'll go left, so just lean a little bit. It's about Crooked Rapids, Wonky Rapids. Hard to keep track of where you are sometimes in that stuff. That was quite swirly even in the main rapid.
We made the most of the calm conditions and stopped not that long before sundown, getting a fire going, which wasn't difficult in these conditions, getting some water boiled before starting to cook. It had been a good half day's paddle from where we started in Woolsey Bay down to here, and it was a joy to be here and to have the fire, despite the fact the hot weather meant we certainly didn't need it for personal warmth.
Too warm to have a fire.
And so ended a great day on a fantastic stretch of the French River, and this is why I love this form of travel, staying in wonderful places like this.